Good morning, everybody. As Lindsay had mentioned, my name is Dinwiddie. I am the Chief Solution Architect at Beyond20. I'm also a ServiceNow Certified Master Architect. So I've spent the last 10 years or so working with ServiceNow. Long time ago, I started out as a client, as a customer of ServiceNow, and then moved into consulting, and then just fell in love with ServiceNow, and have been doing that for the last 10 years or so. So welcome, everybody. Mr. Joe.
Good, thanks, Ryan. Happy Tuesday, all. Thanks for spending time with us today. I am Joe Aranzullo. I am the Director of Service Delivery here at Beyond20. I have been around ServiceNow for about 10 years, much like Ryan, started client, and then I moved to the consulting space. I've been around IT for 15 years or so. So that's me. Ryan, what are we talking about today?
It's a good question, Joe. What are we talking about today? We're talking about user experience, one of my favorite topics. So we're going to talk about user experience, and we're going to talk a little bit about ServiceNow's specific offering when it comes to user experience, talking about the Employee Center and the Employee Center Professional. I'm going to talk about kind of the $6 word in the room, I think, of content taxonomy. Work through some of the good practices around Employee Center, rolling it out to organizations, and then developing it and maintaining it. And then kind of that little bit of like enhancing that employee experience, user experience through chat and virtual agent within ServiceNow. Okay, so for those of you that may not be super familiar with, ServiceNow has been kind of unofficially dubbed the platform of platforms. So this is kind of a busy slide, but really it's just a high-level overview of what ServiceNow is. So ServiceNow is really good at being an enterprise platform. And when I say that, it means that it could be there, and organizations have been, very successful. When I say organizations, I mean Fortune 500 companies. I mean, state organizations, entire cities, local governments. Those kinds of things have all been very successful using ServiceNow to adopt and kind of modernize how they interact with their customers, and customers being their end users, their business folks, and how they're serving them. So whether you're looking on IT, whether you're wanting to look at kind of the HR or employee side of it, whether you're wanting to serve your internal or external customers, or whether you're wanting to bring all of your custom scoped applications for whatever line of business you're supporting, all of those can be moved into ServiceNow. And ServiceNow is really designed to be the system of interaction for your organization. So you see kind of down across the bottom there where I've got like system of record. So all the system of records, work may still happen in those systems. And the idea behind using ServiceNow as the platform of platforms is integrating and kind of aggregating all those user experiences into one platform. So there's one system of engagement for your employees, and then having that work still happen in those systems of records spread across your organization, whatever of those ones you use.
Yeah, looking at this and tying it to Employee Center, our topic for today, wherever you are in your journey with ServiceNow, if you're just starting out, if you've been on the platform a few years, what's great about Employee Center, it's immediately applicable to you. In the past, we've had tools where you have to be using X module, Y application, but Employee Center, regardless of where you are, it's something you can turn on straight away. It's really nice to see.
I appreciate that too, and it's one nice thing Joe and I've talked about quite a bit about, like the idle idea of meeting people where they are. And Joe's going to touch on that a little bit later. But when we talk about idle principles, that's always a really good one to make sure that we're engaging with our customers wherever they are and however they are. Okay. So let's dive into what user experience is. So this may be kind of a simple question without a not so simple answer, I think. And it's been kind of buzzwordy lately. And when I say lately, I mean the last couple of years more specifically. But to me, user experience is more going to be about kind of like a triad of like the interaction, the visual design, and then that supporting architecture that makes kind of all that happen. So the interaction design is really going to be about wanting to make sure that we are interacting with whoever's using the system. I'm going to use some air quotes there, with whoever, to make sure that we're interacting with them in an appropriate way and a correct way. And then visual design, making sure that's visually appealing. So those of you that have used ServiceNow before have noticed over the last couple of years that the visual element and aspects of ServiceNow has gotten some significant advancements. When we talk about the next experience user interface that was just released with San Diego, when we talk about Employee Center, and we'll be seeing some of that a little bit later on. making sure that that's visually appealing and super helpful. But when we come down to the architecture too, like I know that's one of Joe and I's favorite parts, kind of where we have a tendency to nerd out a little bit, is making sure that we've got all that supporting content and all that supporting things in a scalable way to make sure that it's solid for the platform. Because like others, I've probably worked with tools in the past that like it looks great, but as soon as you try and update something, it just completely breaks because there's not a solid architecture. So the interaction design, visual design is great, but the architecture isn't as strong. And that's not what we see with ServiceNow. We see having that architecture in a really strong place.
Yeah, I know user experience is kind of buzzwordy and all that, but I think of a example of user experience that's really close to home. And if you do something around the house, it doesn't pass the spouse test. And that's if I set something up or I install it, I got to ask, like, what's my wife going to think when she tries to use it? What are my kids going to think when they try to use it? And just it's critically important that when you can roll out the greatest system in the universe, but without great UI, a great UI to use and great user experience, it's not going to go very well. And I got a great lesson on this a couple of years ago. I came home, I go in my kitchen, and I see all of the cables from my home theater system were ripped out and put on the table. And so I'm looking at this pile of cable. I'm shocked. And I look at my wife like, what happened? It's broken. Fix it. And when I set it up, everything worked fine. But of course, when someone else came along, the user experience was so poor, they're like, nope, this doesn't work. And they walked away from it because it didn't make sense.
I think that's a great lesson to talk about adoption too, because that's something else that comes up quite a bit, I think, as not just a benefit of user experience, but adoption and usability are just huge items there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about the challenges. If this may sound cynical, but if this was easy, everyone would do it. And one of the big challenges that we see is, especially if you're in a larger organization, you span multiple geographies, having multiple disconnected portals really is a large issue. If you've got your benefits in one portal, you've got maybe internal IT in one portal, you've got external customer facing, you've got, maybe you've got your like alumni portals. There's all these different portals. They may be powered on SharePoint. They may be powered on some other CMS. They may be Drupal. They may be like all these other different technologies. None of them connect. None of them work together. They may not have the same visual stylistic elements. So it's very clear that you're moving between different portals. Or you're turning on things and there may be just kind of an incomplete like baseline experience. And wanting to make sure that we are having something that is, appropriate when it's first released. And one of my personal pet peeves a long time ago, I used to teach web design and web development, was kind of those under construction pages. It's just an immediate, something that makes me annoyed, because why am I seeing it if it's not ready? So there does need to kind of be that base level experience of, this is the minimum starting point for us when we talk about experience on things like this. And one of the other big drawbacks, and one of the things that I think contributes to 1 and 2, is lacking desired capability. So if your internal applications or whatever you're running your portals on, if they're not able to have a solid content management, if they don't have a good architecture, if they can't facilitate that employee communication, they can't do that enterprise-wide federated searching, then there's desired capabilities that are missing there. And it's hard to provide that good user experience with all of that. And a good example of this is, a long time ago, I worked on a project where we spent 2 years with a customer replacing all their internal intranet portals with ServiceNow, with kind of a global GBS, with unified service desk, all of those things. And it was a very long journey, and all happening within ServiceNow.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned multiple disconnected portals, Ryan, because I remember a project a long time ago, I think many moons ago. The environment I was in, their landing page was like a big splash page. So you're a customer, you need help, you go to the link you're given, and it's just like a bunch of boxes. Like, what do you want? Department A, B, or C? And it's a customer, I don't know. So you click on one, and one could take you to a service portal. Another one could take you to an old CMS page, for those that remember the content management system. Or another one is an internal intranet page. Totally different experiences, completely disjointed. And when you run through that, you can't help but think, like, how do the customers use this every day? Like, this is their environment. What do they do? Do they just click something until something happens to get a foot in the door? Or do they just give up and send an email, a Slack, or a Teams message? Or I think I'm saying it right. Or they just pick up the phone. So you've defeated the purpose of the portal. There's no level 0 support. Users are calling you anyways.
Yeah, I think that's a really important call out too, just Joe, from your perspective, just when we talk about user experience too, just shifting that mindset from, IT can be very IT focused, and not necessarily picking on IT, but IT has always been very cut and dried around like, this is the way things are doing, this is the way things are happening. There's been a significant change in the last couple of years to be more of a soft side around how do we interact with the employees, how do the employees see this, and changing that mindset in this to around how would the employee interview this and how would they interact with it, and even so far as like, let's bring employees in and talk to them. Like that's been a super successful thing on some of my projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
But having all that in mind, what inevitably occurs that not enough attention is paid to user experience. So what does ServiceNow say about this? Well, we have Employee Center now. What's the vision behind that? Put simply, it's be intuitive. Be intuitive so it takes less time and effort to find what you need so you can go get stuff done. And underpinning that, Ryan, there's a few key principles. What were they?
So the first one is, if I can click PowerPoint, there we go, serve. So this is, it seems like kind of one of those like obvious no-brainer things, and it's under the covers. Once you get there, it is significantly harder, right, than just, it's one of those kind of generic pie in the sky ideas of let's just give everybody access to everything in all the departments, which is, sounds amazing. And if you don't have the underlying architecture for that data or capable technology, that becomes a really difficult aspect. And one of the big kind of, when we talk about technology capabilities, is integrating. So a good example of this is a couple of years ago, I worked with a manufacturing company to do a quick proof of concept with virtual agent to have conversations with the employees where they could do like things where they were reaching into SAP, like checking order status, checking PO status, checking payment status, things that they were able to do from a ServiceNow portal without having to leave and go into another system. So being able to kind of integrate that portal to, back-end processes, other automations, those kinds of things becomes incredibly amazing to be able to kind of keep people in that specific portal and that system of engagement. Okay. And when it comes to engagement too, one of the most important things that we talk about is people, for the most part, right, there's a few caveats there, but people like to interact with other people. And I don't know about you, and there's probably some sort of scientific term for this, but I feel odd when I'm interacting with a system that is very clean and sterile, where there isn't necessarily a lot of personality, there isn't a lot of interaction to it. And it kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And really, when we're talking about engaging, we're wanting to personalize that experience, with personal names, with maybe some details, with those kinds of things that has, it can even go so far as like the branding and theming, the voice, the tone of the interaction. Like those things all need to be set, and they need to be holistic, and that adds richness to those interactions and those engagements. Another good example of that is I worked with a client probably about a year and a half ago when we were first starting to get back to work. There was virtual agent conversations that we built out around, surveys for, do you want to return to work? Those kinds of things, collecting that information, getting some ideas around the return to work plans, and using ServiceNow as a way to engage with that company's associates to say, are you comfortable returning? What are your plans to return? Do you want to return? So it was more of a conversation and less of a get back to the office, or you will be looking for a new job. Okay. So when we talk about the Employee Center, this is one of those terms that has come out from ServiceNow. I know that there has been a little bit of discussion around it. So let's kind of talk through the timeline of the portal evolution with ServiceNow. So we're going to start kind of like after CMS. So those that have been on ServiceNow for quite a while, the previous version of the content management system was called CMS. And probably very similar to what you've seen for other CMS tools, but I honestly don't remember what release. I forgot to look it up, Joe, if you know off the top of your head, when Service Portal was kind of making its first debut.
I think it's around Istanbul, if I'm not
Okay,
mistaken.
that's
It was
what I
like
was
the
thinking.
early phases. Yeah.
I was thinking Helsinki, Istanbul, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about Quebec and before. So one of the big splits that we saw with kind of the Quebec era was ServiceNow, for the majority of customers, had the service portal, which is kind of dubbed the /SP. And that service portal really was the standard for quite a while, unless you had the HR module. And then if you had the HR module, then you use the Employee Center. And what ServiceNow saw because of that was most companies and most organizations that had HR, instead of supporting dual portals, they would take the Employee Service Center, which had some special interaction capability with employees, and they would configure that to just include IT as a bolt-on. So due to the response from the customers, what ServiceNow decided to do was, now that we have Roman after, we have the Employee Center. So at this point, the /SP service portals are being phased out. And the Employee Center was designed to be that unified, with air quotes, their portal between all of the modules within ServiceNow. So even ServiceNow itself was working to remove the extra portals within the tool, and have the ability to, support that kind of cross-platform, if I can talk, area. And there's really two different versions of the Employee Center, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But those with human resources. So right now, the Employee Center is now going to be the new recommendation for all implementations moving forward. And there is also some migration paths for users that are currently using the SP, or I hate to use the word legacy, but the legacy Employee Service Center, the /ESC. So there's some migration to move forward with those. And really kind of the big split here is, if I'm on the path of, do I want Employee Center Pro or do I want Employee Center? The easiest kind of yardstick that we can use for that is, if you're using HR within ServiceNow, then you'll want the Employee Center Pro. If you're not using HR within ServiceNow, you'll just use the regular Employee Center.
Okay, so I think I got this right. Technology-wise, we go from CMS to Service Portal. And Service Portal is still those underlying bones that are the foundation for Employee Service Center, Employee Center, Employee Center Pro. But how does it impact me if I already have a Service Portal, or maybe I have Employee Service Center as part of my HRSD module? How do I take the next step?
So the obvious joke is you don't, you're done. But that, in actuality, that's not the case, right? So migration paths, there's a lot of, without getting too technical, there's a lot of underlying pieces and widgets and things that were brought over from the ESC, from the Employee Service Center and the Service Portal. So there is a nice smooth migration path there. And a lot of that migration path, though, comes to mind, we want to make sure that we're not forgetting the users. We want to make sure we're bringing the users along, because we'll see in just a second the differences between what the portals look like, especially if you're currently live with ServiceNow. So you'll know what those portals look like in your own environment.
Got it. Thanks for that.
Okay. So customer can stick with what they have, or they can adopt the Employee Center or Employee Center Pro, depending on their needs. There isn't necessarily a you have to get off of the ESC or the SP by any means. I don't think that there will ever necessarily be that mandate. I say I don't think because I don't want to guarantee it. But whatever works for your organization, you can stay with. And you'll actually still find the Service Portal /SP still existing in brand new instances today. So it's not like it's immediately going to go away. It's just a configuration that we're not going to be using as much anymore. Okay, so digging in a little bit deeper to Joe's kind of comments around what exactly is the Employee Center and the Employee Center Pro. So the Employee Center was kind of defined and idealized by ServiceNow as kind of the modern service portal. And it really gives your employees, associates, those that you serve, the ability to report issues, request items, find service-related answers, and complete to-dos. And I do want to very quickly just kind of use my laser pointer here And I might even underline that just because that's one of the coolest things to me. It seems like it should be a kind of an obvious thing, but it just took us until we got to the Employee Center piece from ServiceNow, where it's just inherently designed to run off multiple departments and serve our employees across multiple departments. Okay. And when we talk about pro, we're talking about that same kind of that same sort of like service to our employees, but there's an additional layer. Because HR is involved and because there's other capabilities kind of beyond HR, we're wanting to make sure that we can have that additional communication with our employees through the Employee Center Pro. And when we talk about the Employee Center Pro, we really talk about, delivering a lot of additional content, engaging with our employees, bringing them into the support and the services that they're seeking, and then also kind of having that cross-enterprise answer, and then keeping my laser pointer out, kind of that external content. So that's kind of one of the other big differentiators is the Employee Center Pro kind of gets a little bit more help in its ability to do that federated search across your environment, bring in to-dos from your HCM systems, or maybe bring in to-dos from your LMS tools like Cornerstone. All of those are going to be severely amplified with the Employee Center and Employee Center Pro. Okay. One of the other final important notes is the Employee Center and Employee Center Pro are packaged by ServiceNow in store apps. So the other really great thing I love about this is this kind of brings the shift away a little bit from the product family releases. So those of you that may not be familiar, ServiceNow typically releases two releases a year as what we call family releases. So moving these out of the family releases and moving them into the store allows ServiceNow to keep the content, the architecture, those kinds of things updated more rapidly. And you've got a lot more control as an admin around bringing those in outside of your standard release cycle. So new updates, new widgets, those kinds of things, you can bring those in and update them specifically in your instances. Okay. So we have our baseline Employee Center, and let's take a look at that. And you've probably seen what the baseline Employee Center looks like from ServiceNow. And this does kind of very much match with the Next Experience user interface that's on the agent side of the platform. And we see that Employee Center, and this Employee Center is kind of going to be the base model for this platform. And we see interactions around like the items that I have, those recommendations that are for me. Those are sort of dynamic items, but also having, popular topics, having quick tasks that are available to me, that nice footer to kind of give more of that holistic experience. And when we talk about the Employee Center Pro, we see a lot of similar look and feel to the Employee Center. We see kind of that mega menu across the top, but we start to see way more dynamic content, and we see that already within this header section. And kind of continuing the scroll through the Employee Center Pro, we see the ability to have additional content in there when it comes to videos, additional content into maybe across the organization where we're taking people out to career pages. Maybe that's hosted, within the HCM, or maybe across the bottom here where I'm starting to use ServiceNow as kind of a landing page. A lot of times if you've got single sign-on pages like Okta, like Azure, where you've got, kind of all the different sites you can visit, there is the ability and supportedness within the Employee Center Pro to be able to do that within ServiceNow, kind of, again, continuing to cut down what applications and what portals people may be getting access to.
Yeah, and with these two products in mind, we all know it's never as simple as turn it on, walk away. Another important part to any UI is the content taxonomy behind it. No, I didn't say catalog taxonomy, and we'll get into why. So here we are looking at the back end. Yeah, advance a little bit. There we go. And as if we were building out a catalog today. I have my IT catalog, my HR catalog with their respective categories, subcategories, and catalog items. Very familiar territory if you spent time configuring ServiceNow. What's important to keep in mind that this could be applied to more than just your catalog. Well-defined content taxonomy can bridge processes and other components of the platform like knowledge management, incident management, change management. And with that in mind, when you're defining your taxonomy, like with most things, less can be more. So if this list were to continue to expand beyond this, you run the risk of putting your customer in a situation where there isn't an intuitive, heard that before, selection, and your better half will rip the cables out from behind the TV. Or customers might just default to choosing those infamous other or generic options just to move forward and request service.
Okay. So when we talk about content taxonomy too, we want to look at kind of the other side of that. So there's a very intentional split here between service catalog that Joe just talked about. And when we talk about what's going to be available on the Employee Center or the content taxonomy. So the content taxonomy here is going to be similar in the service catalog, but it's really just going to be a translation. And when I say translation, it means IT or those line of business folks, the departments that may be using ServiceNow, they don't speak the same language necessarily that employees do. And we notice this, especially when it comes to offering services and consuming services. So Joe, I think you had a good example about that.
Yeah, I think the example we were talking about last night was if you ever ate out at the Cheesecake Factory, their menu it's a book. And even if you went there and you weren't hungry, by the time you flip through all the pages, you developed an appetite. And putting that in this context, it's like, oh, what's impeding me at the Cheesecake Factory from making a quick, informed decision about what to eat? It's the content taxonomy. If that was simplified, we didn't get so deep in the weeds, I could make a quick decision. And for the record, whenever I go there, I just order the same thing to keep it simple, which is chicken bellagio, of course.
And the other thing that we were talking about, TJ, that I love is, the kitchen and thinking about like your visit to the Cheesecake Factory, the kitchen and the dining room are two separate entities. And the dining room orders, you order your specific chicken dish, but that comes into the kitchen, and the kitchen hopefully doesn't go to the freezer and pull out your chicken dish and then warm it up for you, right? They go into the walk-in cooler, they grab the chicken, they grab the cheese, they grab I'm assuming, knowing you, bacon, all sorts of other things, and then they assemble that and then send it out to you as an assembled dish, right? So that's kind of the analogy that we're talking about with Service Catalog and Employee Center is IT, the Service Catalog organization, may be very focused on where do these things roll up to an ownership, or where does it make sense from an IT perspective to organize the service catalog? But we have the opportunity with the content taxonomy on the Employee Center to not necessarily serve that content the way that that IT sees it. So we could just be that if I need a new computer, maybe I can have that new computer, but maybe I've got questions about it. And through the Employee Center, we're offering support, we're offering additional items into these categories. And we're going to dig into this a little bit more into this taxonomy. But wanting to say that not necessarily everything that's within this taxonomy is going to be something I'm going to request. It could be information, it could be links out to external places, it could be whatever we need to service that need from the customer. Okay. So let's kind of dig into this a little bit more with our taxonomy. So with this taxonomy, we're talking about kind of aligning these to the way that the employees are going to see those services. And taxonomies can be defined where if I am serving different, and when I say different, I mean significantly different, like internal versus external customers, I can have different taxonomies for those if needed. But typically for those internal customers, we're going to have one taxonomy. And one of the important notes here is that we don't necessarily have a one-to-one relationship with these supporting items. So it's going to be about having that content, having it be specific enough and be useful, but still a little generic. And I realize that's not necessarily descriptive at all. But having knowledge articles that could maybe support multiple areas within my content taxonomy, or if it's a very specific fix, or if it's a very specific link, I can have those quick links out again as well. And I'm also not having that limited to a specific child topic. So we can dig into this a little bit more in the next couple slides.
Yeah, I get you what you mean about be descriptive and not too descriptive. Like this is a great example of how a good content taxonomy can apply across the business and by extension across your employee center. When a catalog item or knowledge article can roll up to the same child topic or category, and when you do so, it's best to view the taxonomy in abstract. Don't get lost in the weeds. It should be applicable across departments and not purpose-built for one single process or offering. Back to your example about building it like employee center for IT. No, it should be employee center for the business.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a very specific example. And Joe and I kind of went through a couple of different iterations of this to make sure that we were, kind of helping illustrate the point a little bit. And I know that we're spending quite a few slides on this, but this goes back to that kind of architecture discussion earlier on in the deck when we talked about wanting to have a good supporting architecture for our user experience. And the content taxonomy from ServiceNow, that's essentially how we do it. So looking at a real world example of this, kind of a reminder of that framework where we've got the catalog group, the category, subcategory, and subcategories could have an S there, as in like more than one subcategories, and catalog items again, to kind of expand it into plural. Looking at the target of that, and again, that target could be IT finance, again, typically on the back end, who owns those business services. But at the same time, that's not necessarily transparent. It doesn't have to be transparent to the employees. They may not necessarily know or care who services their request. They just want to get it done. And then we have our parent category, our subcategories, and then those orderable items. And then breaking this out into kind of a real world example is, again, IT catalog, but it doesn't necessarily matter who. But maybe I'm looking at a hardware category, and maybe there's a knowledge article on selecting specific types of hardware. If we're not able to perform any automation to say, because you're in X role, you automatically get this machine, we can offer a little bit of guidance in there from a knowledge article. Maybe we offer laptops, we offer desktops, tablets, depending on how you work. And then under our laptop category, we can have some quick links to maybe the most common items, to drive people towards the same thing. And maybe we've got our individual catalog items around developer laptop, business laptop. Maybe also in there, if we're listing prices in our catalog, maybe we have a simple knowledge article about how chargebacks work, or how some of that discussion works, or maybe you're going to need manager approval, or it comes with this software, those kinds of things that can just be additional detail and additional richness and context to be able to make better decisions in that portal.
Yeah, it's a really great example, Ryan. Like we see the logical grouping here, or folder structure, instead of giving users one long exhaustive list and giving them analysis paralysis. So when you create these, take a step back and say, well, what do we do as an organization? What services do we offer customer? Those will help define your categories. So hardware or software, a couple examples. And then when you get to your subcategories, think, okay, what are the components of that service I provide my business? Take hardware, for example, breaking that down into server, desktop, laptop. I think we have an example in the next slide too.
Yeah, we do. It's going to be super helpful. So this next slide, before I bring it up, I just want to admit that it is a bit of an eye chart, and it is just a good example, but taking inventory of the services that you offer and then breaking those out into kind of that catalog taxonomy, here's how something might look for a good example.
Yeah, this previous example, starting out a bit further, you see we have all of our services, what we offer the business as categories, infrastructure, email, mobility, then subcategories, like what about email, what about mobility? And then from this, we can create connections to service offerings, knowledge articles, and reference these incidents in other areas of the platform.
And to kind of finalize Joe's point too, like this is not an exhaustive list by any means, and this is more focused on the IT specific, because it kind of depends on what line of businesses you're running within ServiceNow, whether it's facilities, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, those kinds of things, legal, all the different service management arenas. They all can have content in the catalog taxonomy as well. Okay. So let's talk about some good practices on the Employee Center. One of my absolute favorite things within the Employee Center is the AI search. So there's I don't think I get a lot of pushback when I would make a broad statement as saying that there are two types of people in the world, right? There are browsers and there are searchers. I am not a browser at all. I'm going to search immediately for what I'm looking for. I rarely ever go to menus in places. The search bar is immediately where I go to. So I've just kind of like grouped people into the world based on those two different attributes. So that's one of the reasons I'm a huge fan of the AI search. But under the covers for the AI search, there are configurable search sources. So you can search across catalog, knowledge, for example, incidents, any ServiceNow data table, and the caveat is always like data that I have access to, right? Because security still applies when I'm doing searching. The next kind of major area is the search profiles are amazing. So you can change individual search experiences. So you can have individual search sources. One of the absolute coolest things that I love, and let me get my highlighter out, is the synonyms here. So working within your organization to say, what is SAP called, for example? Like maybe SAP is rebranded as something else. Maybe your HCM or Workday is rebranded as some other thing. So people aren't searching for the word Workday. Maybe they're searching for, whatever it's called. So setting up those synonyms, and also when we talk about the catalog items, right? Adding that as like a meta or keyword onto that catalog item makes a big difference. The typo handling is also my favorite because those of you that know me know that I can't spell for anything. So it's absolutely amazing. And then kind of the improvement rules and the additional results as well. One of the things that makes it awesome for me. If I can find my mouse, there we go. Okay, so search results. So there is also some configurability with the search results that you're getting back. So one of the things that again, a huge fan of ServiceNow in general, but they left this configurable a little bit to the developers and to your organization to make sure that you can have the experience that you want. And there is also case deflection, which again, I'm also a huge fan of tier 0 when it comes to case deflection, especially if we're taking the super powerful AI search and we're embedding it within maybe catalog items or record producers to try and stem the flow of some of the inbound cases that could necessarily be resolved with a knowledge article or maybe a virtual agent conversation.
Yeah, what's great about AI searches, and tying this back to our previous topic, is kind of the counterpoint for not having a large, cumbersome content taxonomy. You don't need to define subcategory after subcategory after subcategory. You can keep that taxonomy more high level and applicable across the business, and only define it deep enough to where it brings value when you're building great metrics to help measure your KPIs. AI search, I can just come in as a user and get what I need. Like, think about your Amazon search or Google search. Like Ryan, we all make typos, and it's always like, oh, did you mean this? Or showing results for this thing you actually meant, but that's not what you told us, but we figured it out anyways. Or for my earlier example with my home theater system, my wife could just sit down and say, watch TV. And then no matter how things are wired or set up, she gets the expected result on the first go.
And to kind of follow up to Joe's point, like that AI search is one of those things that gives me a little bit of more of like a human feeling interaction. Like if I'm misspelling or if it's suggesting items, I don't always type what I mean to type. So it's a really good experience to be like, oh, okay, you really do understand what I'm asking for and you're trying to help me proactively.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're considering your next rollout, we have some do's and don'ts for best practice.
Sounds good.
All right. So the first do is when it comes to ServiceNow, it's very, very easy to have your eyes bigger than your stomach. Don't try to eat the whole elephant. Just iterate early and often. Remember, iterative success beats delayed perfection every time.
And in the big don'ts, exactly to Joe's counterpoint, like don't do a big bang when it comes to Portal. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced that before. It's not pleasant. It's best to start with one area, develop the content, make it really good, get some feedback, and then move on to the next area.
And Ryan, you made a reference to this before. There's an ITIL principle. Start from where you are. Where did my dude go? There we go. Or put differently, the wheel, take a look around. ServiceNow has purposefully laid out a lot of baseline materials for you that can really accelerate your time to value. It's not just fluffy demo data, it's useful and you can leverage it straight away.
Yeah, and to that point too, not a whole lot else to add there, Joe, other than just like, don't build your taxonomy from scratch. And that slide that we had in there that had all of the good content taxonomy on there, it's a good way to start a conversation to say, like, here's what others have done. And especially if you've got contacts with your partner or with others in your industry that are using ServiceNow to say, what's your content taxonomy look like? Maybe that'll spur some ideas.
Yeah, and again, before starting from scratch, take a look at the hundreds of out-of-box widgets at your disposal. If you can't find what you need, you can always check the ServiceNow store. The hard work might already be done for you.
I'm a big fan of that because I hate writing widgets. So one of my don't for this is don't wait till the end of the project to show your users. And this is one of the things I can't stress enough. So going back to the example that I had a little while ago with the large enterprise customer and the return to work, we worked with them for a couple of years, and they actually had an employee kind of steering committee that we would bring designs to, we would bring user experience to, and they would provide feedback. And that was incredibly valuable to get their experience while we're doing our agile development, and not after we're in our user testing and saying, oh man, we got to add another sprint, we got to figure this out, we got to push go live. Like getting their experiences early and often.
Yeah, and if you search the hundreds of widgets in the store and you find you still need to create something, just keep the original intended purpose of that widget in mind. Remember, it's just one widget. If you find you keep needing to pack more and more functionality into it, maybe you need two.
Yeah, and the don't for this one too is don't do everything custom, right? I mean, I would think like most developers I know, like myself, are lazy, that they're going to try and find to see if somebody else did it and did it better. Same applies here. Like there's probably something that's already been written for that.
Yeah, and ServiceNow gives us the easel and the palette to go create your own thing. But if you find yourself looking for a custom solution, you should definitely start on your own canvas. Create a scoped application and to build your customizations from. ServiceNow is constantly enhancing the widgets and other things that are out of box. They might make updates you don't want to miss. And also your ServiceNow upgrade project team will thank you for not customizing.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with like reinventing the wheel on page design. So the pages that ServiceNow has are all fairly good in the layouts and really good in a lot of the layouts. So completely redoing that page layout is something that you're probably going to end up regretting with customization and having that technical debt.
And with Employee Center spanning the business, this is the opportunity to unify your Employee Center, your portal, and have a consistent look and feel. Where I go to find something shouldn't differ across departments.
And to that point too, like it needs to be consistent with the voice and tone and visual appearance of your organization. So making sure that we're keeping look and feel in the forefront and not having it be an afterthought.
I know that it feels like a pivot, because in the past, if I was on ITSM engagement, ITAM engagement, CSM engagement, like UI was always a component of that one engagement. Then we would go tailor the UI for that process area. But now with Employee Center spanning the platform, we have an opportunity to have just one team administer Employee Center, ensuring that it's consistent and it has continuity throughout.
Yeah, and to that point, like I think we can probably all agree on the black hole that it is when you're designing by committee. It doesn't matter whether it's necessarily a portal, whether it's a process, those kinds of things. Having empowered decision makers in the conversation that have, the visual ability to look at it and understand the needs of the organization, that's going to make things much easier.
Yeah, and taking this a step further, here's some best practices for Employee Center itself. We just said this, but it bears repeating. Keep it consistent. You don't want to have to develop two sets of institutional knowledge, one for the IT side and one for the HR side, for example, and then have to relearn that when perhaps one department makes a change that the other ones didn't embrace. Second, a welcome change a long time ago was that ServiceNow moved away from CMS, like Ryan and I were talking about. CMS ran on proprietary code called Jelly, It was very hard to find people that were proficient in it, very hard to get the materials. We leaned heavily on the ServiceNow wiki and in other articles. There was some content, but no official training. But with the change of the service portal and bringing in Bootstrap and Angular.js, now I can go hire an Angular developer. I can go find someone, or if I have someone on staff, there's a lot of materials for those people to get it enabled and be able to provide value. And so if you have those folks on staff, get them enabled and just allow like 1 to 3 months for them, depending on the courses offered by ServiceNow.
One of the things that I am a huge proponent of, and I will start those conversations early with clients when we've got Portal involved in our engagements, is engaging with the marketing digital teams early, because they're going to be the experts when it comes to branding, theming, and voice. And I'm a huge fan of defining those useful metrics for each support process. So I hate when we get to go live and it's like, oh man, we didn't talk about how we're going to be successful, right? Backing those conversations up earlier, and bringing those items up with your partner of like, how do we know we're going to be successful? And also making sure that we've got those feedback loops created for knowledge articles, incident deflection, or if you're running any other like analytics or click tracking software within the portal itself. And making sure that the processes are well defined before portal adoption, and the processes should be stable and mature. A good example of that is, can my fulfillment team respond to comments on the request record? So are they empowered? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the capabilities? Do they have the capacity to be able to support things like this? Okay. So this is this again sounds like a silly thing, but it's one lesson that I learned the hard way a very long time ago, to making sure that we're identifying what everything needs to run on. And thanks to recent changes from ServiceNow, there are very few devices that don't run ServiceNow natively or through a browser. And I was looking at IE. I know there's some still organizations that do run it, but hopefully it's being phased out as well for Edge. And we kind of hit on this earlier too, but making sure that we are iterating early and iterating often, and keeping that customization small to make sure that we're having a stable environment. And then engaging a designer for part of your ServiceNow implementation. So not everyone can and should be a web designer. I used to teach web design, but I'm still not a great web designer for that reason. So for that reason, I also will try and seek out resources that have that good visual design, that have that capability, because not everyone should be doing it within the organization.
Yeah, and to that point, we recommend you have a team to manage and really govern Employee Center. You'll benefit from having that tiebreaker in the room and considering UX decisions, and it's not going to be, like Ryan said before, by committee. And then from a knowledge sharing perspective and capacity standpoint, it's something I deal with every day. It's a great idea to have more than one customer developer trained and experienced to ensure long-term support. I think we've all been bitten by that over the past 18 months or so, where that one person that had that innate knowledge departed the company for new adventures. So train them up and ensure you'll be supported for the years to come.
Okay, just kind of, I feel like we can't get through a webinar without at least having a little bit of technical recommendations, and kind of following ServiceNow's lead on the whole idea of the no-low pro code. So when we talk about the no code, we want to make sure that we are avoiding complexity, and using out-of-box configuration instead, and making sure that we're always checking to see what's out there and is already built. So if I'm taking something that's already built, no need for me to code it. When I'm looking at something low code, we're wanting to make sure that we are being very targeted with our specific items. So if there's specific changes that need to happen, specific behaviors, we're not necessarily applying those globally, we're applying them within that instance that we need to have that happen. And we're making sure that we are not hard coding things. Again, this goes without saying, but it's one of those good practices that we're always wanting to follow. And I'm a huge proponent of documentation here. So wanting to make sure that we are knowing those dependencies, knowing how we are doing our components, and making sure that we're understanding our custom widgets. So that's going to be one of those platform stability items in the future. Okay, so let's talk about chat and virtual agent and how they add to the user experience.
Yeah, we talked about the evolution of Employee Center. We covered what good content taxonomies look like. So how do we get customers engaged? Well, we start by meeting them where they are. Think about all those times that someone pings you with, hey, quick question, or if you work in an office, someone knocks on your cubicle, but also says knock, knock, or knocks on your door. How can we direct these questions from folks to a system of engagement like ServiceNow? I mean, today we have no shortage of ways to collaborate. I'm a huge fan of Slack, but my organization also uses Teams. Some folks stick to email. So even if I rolled out the greatest employee center tomorrow, my customers aren't going to change how they engage me overnight. So how do I take this omni-channel traffic and direct it towards ServiceNow? Ryan?
My answer to that is automate. Every problem in my life, first question is, can I automate it? So knowing what your employees are searching for, and bringing technology in to support that for virtual agent is a good example, but also connecting ServiceNow to Teams, connecting ServiceNow to Slack, to other communication tools within my organization. We've got that available. And having that virtual agent around to automate simple tasks like check ticket status, maybe pull data in from another system, update some of my user data, send me out to Workday or whatever HCM tool I'm doing that with. And I can have those external integrations, those third-party technologies. And if all else fails, if I'm not, as an end user, able to get my resolution, we can route it to a live agent. So I love having the live agent support within ServiceNow for us to be able to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned virtual agent. It provides so much out of the box. By turning on virtual agent plugins, you can enable nearly 100 conversations for ITSM. Or if you're using customer service management, out of the box, I get 15 conversations, or HR 35. That's a really quick time to value, and I can always iterate and expand on those conversations based on my usage data to meet my business need.
And like Joe mentioned, it's such a giant kickstart to just, be up and running with that. But when we're talking about that, we're wanting to make sure that we're, exploring and setting that up. But we're also using some like data-driven deflection and use case. So we're wanting to make sure that the virtual agent conversations that we're either using or developing are going to be helpful and functional. We want to build those out, starting with kind of the out-of-box topics and pulling things in like natural language understanding, and making sure that we're using that conversation builder to do low-code development of that and have kind of that drag and drop interaction. Once we've got that and have been through our testing, then we're publishing that and engaging our employees through that with kind of a rich and engaging experience, and wanting to make sure that we are really truly deflecting those. And then the cycle starts all over again, right? With continual service improvement, wanting to make sure that we are optimizing those conversations, adjusting them as the business changes. So we talked about virtual agent, but one of the kind of final underlying pieces within that employee experience is going to be all around knowledge.
Yeah, for knowledge, think about self-service, and having that 24/7, 365 access to knowledge for self-service is truly invaluable, because people are able to help themselves. Click my next box, and if they can help themselves, they can get what they need to get back to work even quicker versus having to pick up the phone or get in a queue.
And all of that leads to a reduction in calls, right? So lower hold times, less stress for agents, especially when it comes to, to seasons. And I know everybody's been talking about turnover lately, making those agent jobs just a little bit easier and giving them the ability to spend more time with the employees that actually are calling in and needing that help, and then giving that better user experience for them. we're also from knowledge and other areas, starting to get data and insight into employees' habits and needs. So instead of being reactive with our knowledge, we can start to be proactive with our knowledge and work that into the employee experience. And all of the things that we've kind of talked about today kind of come into that culminated curated experience that we're using through the Employee Center to give employees like a more holistic, more caring, more felt for experience through ServiceNow.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Joe. And happy Tuesday to you all. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.